I am Colonel Douglas McGregor. The ceasefire has completely collapsed, and within the next 72 hours, the global security architecture will either plunge into the most catastrophic military escalation since the Second World War, or Washington will finally be forced to confront the grim operational reality it is desperately trying to conceal. Today is May 4th, 2026, and the geopolitical landscape has fundamentally altered. American naval warships are currently operating within the Strait. Iranian unmanned aerial vehicles and ballistic missiles are actively airborne, and the Gulf Arab states are rapidly declaring formal states of emergency. As this unprecedented crisis unfolds in real time, every sovereign government on the planet is evaluating a singular, critical question: what true combat capability does the United States actually retain? I will not provide the sanitized version manufactured within think tank policy papers, nor the fabricated narratives fed to cabinet officials and regurgitated as absolute fact. I will provide a rigorous military assessment based strictly on operational evidence. Let us conduct an honest accounting of the strategic landscape. Prior to the initiation of hostilities, the United States defined three explicit, measurable conditions that would constitute operational success: the execution of regime change in Tehran, the total elimination of Iran's ballistic missile capabilities, and the complete destruction of the Iranian nuclear program. After 40 days of the most intensive American strategic air campaign in modern military history, resulting in the expenditure of tens of billions of dollars, the permanent loss of dozens of advanced aircraft, and the critical depletion of munition stockpiles at rates far exceeding immediate industrial replenishment capacity, the operational result is undeniable. Zero stated objectives have been achieved. Regarding the objective of regime change, the targeted government is not merely structurally intact. It currently commands significantly more domestic political legitimacy than it did before the first munition was dropped. The strategic bombing campaign predictably generated a profound rally around the flag effect, granting the ruling apparatus a level of unified popular support it had previously struggled to maintain. Citizens who were highly skeptical of their leadership 3 months ago are now standing in solid alignment with the state. This is not an ideological shift, but a deeply rational defensive response from a population witnessing a foreign military assault upon their sovereign territory. Regarding the elimination of ballistic missile capabilities, the administration's claims collapse entirely upon contact with physical reality. Iranian ballistic missiles are actively dominating the airspace today, decisively striking maritime vessels and pulverizing vital infrastructure within the United Arab Emirates. These are not bureaucratic claims. These are devastating operational results, proving the missile network was never neutralized. Iran has spent decades meticulously studying the battle damage assessments of the 1,991 Desert Storm campaign, where the United States falsely claimed to have destroyed Iraqi military industrial capacity after Iraqi forces had already evacuated their critical assets. Consequently, Tehran constructed immense geographical dispersal, deep subterranean hardening, and complex systemic redundancy that renders the total aerial elimination of their missile capabilities a complete strategic fantasy against a fully prepared adversary. Furthermore, the Iranian nuclear program is completely removed from the current diplomatic negotiating framework. Tehran has explicitly refused to include its nuclear ambitions in any dialogue because they are not negotiating from a position of strategic weakness. They are operating from the formidable position of a nation that has absorbed the absolute maximum kinetic punishment the most powerful military on earth could deliver, yet remains firmly standing. Simultaneously, Iranian F-5S, Su-30S, MiG-29S, and F-14 fighter aircraft are actively conducting combat patrols over Iranian airspace today, directly contradicting administration claims that the adversary's air force was entirely annihilated. The official claims fundamentally fail to match the observable reality. We must definitively identify the origin of the policy driving this catastrophic war. This strategic trajectory is not originating from the seasoned intelligence professionals at the Central Intelligence Agency or the Defense Intelligence Agency. It is being actively authored by the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, an organization initially established with a Hebrew name that functions in everyday practice as a direct adjunct of Israeli foreign policy. This specific think tank is currently drafting the draconian economic warfare strategy that the American Treasury Secretary is aggressively implementing. This is not a conspiracy theory. It is a documentable institutional reality traceable through policy frameworks, personnel connections, and specific economic arguments. We are witnessing Israeli foreign policy being forcefully executed by American military projection. Let us evaluate the current operational situation within the Strait. The United States suddenly announced its intention to forcibly open the Strait of Hormuz today, a surprise declaration that generated profound skepticism among military professionals, because the complex operational prerequisites for such an action remain entirely unmet. While 2 American warships operate in the Arabian Gulf, and the administration claims 2 American-flagged container ships successfully transited, other vessels attempting this highly contested route have been directly engaged and struck by advanced Iranian weapons systems. The United States claims to have sunk several small Iranian naval craft, but the broader strategic picture is far more severe. Bahrain has officially declared a nationwide state of emergency, and Kuwait is teetering on the precipice of enacting identical measures. This theater illuminates a profound strategic reality. Iran deliberately chose not to respond to American naval escalation with a predictable, proportional tactical engagement. They actively bypassed the traditional escalation ladder. When American armed forces aggressively targeted Iranian maritime assets, Tehran did not retaliate by proportionally striking American vessels. Instead, they unleashed devastating strikes upon the United Arab Emirates. This is a highly specific strategic communication. Iran is definitively demonstrating that its response architecture refuses to conform to American escalatory logic. By targeting the UAE, Tehran is signaling that the severe costs it intends to extract for continued American military adventurism will not be neatly contained within a localized bilateral military exchange. The surrounding Gulf states, whose very national survival inherently relies upon massive stationary infrastructure situated entirely within the range of Iranian ballistic missiles, have become the pivotal variable rendering continued American escalation strategically unaffordable. The United Arab Emirates has inexplicably made a catastrophic strategic calculation that irrevocably locks them into this brutal conflict, entirely stripping them of their ability to exit on favorable terms. They have willingly integrated Israeli air defense systems and currently host Israeli military personnel operating directly on Emirati soil. This unprecedented development would have been considered politically unthinkable across the broader Arab world until very recently. The UAE has deeply aligned its national destiny with the Greater Israel Project and the sprawling American military campaign. This precarious alignment only yields success if Iran suffers a total, paralyzing strategic defeat. Because all empirical evidence overwhelmingly suggests Iran will survive this conflict intact, the UAE has made an existential commitment from which it simply cannot recover. Consequently, nations like Bahrain, Kuwait, and Qatar, who explicitly did not desire this war, are currently observing the devastation Iran is inflicting upon the UAE and anxiously recalculating their own dire survival odds. They recognize that they have permanently alienated themselves from the broader regional community upon which their long-term geopolitical stability fundamentally depends. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent's economic pressure campaign, derived entirely from the Foundation for Defense of Democracy's analysis, is built upon a fatally flawed foundation. The prevailing theory dictates that the naval blockade is successfully strangling Iranian oil revenue, that domestic Iranian crude storage capacity is perilously approaching absolute saturation, and that critical Iranian oil wells are imminently at risk of catastrophic structural collapse due to severe maintenance failures induced by American sanctions. Absolutely every single element of that analysis is demonstrably incorrect. Iranian petroleum is continuously moving seamlessly across the expansive Pakistani border, where drastically expanded gray market and sophisticated black market operations are consistently generating incredibly substantial hard currency revenue through vast overland routes that a purely naval blockade fundamentally lacks the mechanical ability to interdict. Furthermore, extensive ship-to-ship crude transfers routinely occur within highly permissive maritime zones, where Iranian petroleum is strategically relabeled before ultimate delivery to international buyers who consciously maintain highly deniable, lucrative relationships with deeply entrenched Iranian supply chains. Iranian national storage is emphatically not approaching critical saturation, and their operational wells are absolutely not facing the catastrophic maintenance-related collapse that the administration confidently predicted. The foundational economic premise underlying the naval blockade was always far more an exercise in hopeful psychological projection than an exercise in rigorous economic analysis. This represents a profound institutional failure, fully explaining why the naval blockade was publicly heralded as an act of unparalleled strategic genius, despite the documented reality that it was merely intercepting a paltry 3% of overall Iranian maritime traffic. It explains why the Iranian domestic economy was breathlessly described as collapsing when empirical evidence proved it was functioning entirely adequately, and why an administration that had achieved zero military objectives genuinely believed it was decisively winning this war. Iran's communication to the globe is brutally explicit. The surrounding Gulf states are absolutely not viewed as innocent bystanders. Sovereign states that have willingly provided lucrative basing rights, seamless logistical support, and unwavering political backing to the American military campaign are rightfully viewed by Tehran as fully active belligerent parties. Because Iran comprehensively assesses this escalating conflict as an existential threat, these allied states will be engaged as active enemy combatants, not as neutral infrastructure. Iran has publicly guaranteed that if the United States resumes full-scale military combat operations, the vast oil production infrastructure anchoring the economies of Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates will be immediately targeted for total destruction, eliminating them as viable modern states. These are capability-backed guarantees issued from a formidable nation that has relentlessly demonstrated it executes precisely what it promises. Bahrain's sudden declaration of a nationwide state of emergency is the panicked response of a government that has loudly received the uncompromising Iranian message and is taking the existential threat incredibly seriously. Kuwait finds itself trapped in the exact same paralyzing predicament. This brings us to the monumental diplomatic intervention by Moscow. Russian President Vladimir Putin recently initiated a highly consequential 90-minute telephone call directly to Donald Trump. The subsequent readout provided by the Russian diplomatic corps was brutally explicit in its stark warning. Any continued American military aggression directed against Iran will directly manifest in consequences that are utterly devastating for the United States, cataclysmic for the broader Middle Eastern region, and completely catastrophic for the entire global economy. It is vital to note that this is only the second time President Putin has proactively initiated a direct presidential-level telephone call within this specific relationship. Putin does not utilize direct presidential communications casually. He initiates them strictly when the underlying message necessitates the immense weight of direct head of state communication to ensure it is not dismissed as diplomatic noise. Crucially, the Iranian foreign minister physically traveled to Moscow immediately prior to this monumental phone call, spending 90 minutes engaging directly with Putin to communicate Iran's precise operational assessment and unyielding intentions. Putin subsequently called Washington armed with this incredibly fresh, critically vital intelligence. The undeniable structure of this chronological sequence clearly indicates Putin was not calling to speculate. He was communicating exactly what he had just been directly told by the uppermost echelons of Iranian leadership. Simultaneously, the Russian Federation is actively offering a highly constructive diplomatic alternative alongside its grave warnings. Putin has explicitly indicated a strong willingness to officially co-sign any comprehensive settlement arrangement as a primary geopolitical guarantor, providing Iran with the absolute assurance that agreements reached with the United States will be strictly honored. Given the extensive history of sudden American treaty withdrawals, direct American assurances are now deemed entirely insufficient by Tehran as a reliable foundation for compliance. Moscow is offering concrete security guarantees for the Iranian state, a formal Russian co-signature on nuclear oversight arrangements, and a tangible pathway to a lasting settlement. However, accepting this offer requires the United States to swallow a reality its arrogant institutional culture finds exceedingly difficult, acknowledging that the Russian Federation possesses a highly legitimate role in Middle Eastern security and that the fleeting unipolar moment is definitively over. It requires embracing the undeniable multipolar reality that necessitates seamlessly integrating other global great powers into complex diplomatic frameworks. Whether the deeply insulated advisors surrounding the president possess the courage to communicate this harsh reality honestly, rather than automatically dismissing any Russian involvement as adversarial interference and weakness, is the ultimate question. Ultimately, the domestic economy is the undeniable clock dictating the pace of this crisis. The American domestic economy simply cannot sustain these brutal conditions through the upcoming midterm elections. The global cost of critical aviation fuel has already doubled. More than 20,000 commercial flights across Europe have been abruptly canceled, and major European airlines have entirely halted the vital training of new staff, forcefully signaling that their near-term business model does not require trained personnel because a massive percentage of their scheduled flights will not operate. The traditionally lucrative American summer travel season is rapidly approaching, and citizens will suddenly discover a desolate landscape of endlessly canceled flights and permanently grounded aircraft. Furthermore, domestic gasoline prices have violently surged to unprecedented levels. A staggering 60% of American households shockingly do not possess even $1,000 in emergency savings, meaning they simply cannot absorb these catastrophic price increases without experiencing immediate, highly visible economic distress. Simultaneously, commercial diesel prices are aggressively accelerating toward terrifying thresholds that will soon render the vital American trucking industry completely economically unsustainable at current freight rates. When the commercial trucking sector becomes economically paralyzed, the complex supply chains that move consumer goods will become catastrophically disrupted, resulting in empty store shelves nationwide. Everyday voters do not conduct highly nuanced geopolitical assessments at the ballot box. They ruthlessly assess whether they can reliably afford basic necessities and whether their leaders possess fundamental competence. By absolutely every single crucial metric, the current national trajectory is hurtling in the catastrophically wrong direction faster than any clever political management strategy can compensate. The question is whether a political response will materialize in time to prevent the escalating economic damage from crossing the perilous threshold into deep structural devastation that takes years to fully recover from. This leads us to the grim truth desperately being suppressed inside the walls of the executive branch. There is a specific, tremendously dangerous problem festering inside the American decision-making structure. The deeply entrenched individuals closely surrounding the president are actively refusing to tell him the unvarnished truth. This is not due to a lack of accurate intelligence, but because they firmly believe their primary institutional role is to endlessly sustain the president's personal confidence and blindly validate the disastrous decisions he has already made. In an environment where explicitly challenging the president's preferred narrative immediately results in swift removal from the inner circle, the entirely rational individual survival calculation is to meticulously curate and provide only the specific version of reality that the president eagerly wants to hear. This toxic echo chamber ensures the commander-in-chief is currently making monumental decisions based entirely upon heavily sanitized assessments. When the president confidently proclaims the Iranian Air Force is destroyed or the naval blockade is highly successful, seasoned intelligence professionals in the room who know the empirical data completely contradicts his glowing assessment, remain entirely silent out of professional self-preservation. When advanced, Iranian missiles obliterate vital Gulf state infrastructure, and the administration dismisses it as desperate flailing. Analysts intimately understand that a genuinely collapsing adversary cannot execute highly coordinated, massively complex precision strikes, yet they refuse to speak up. The foundational feedback mechanism designed to catch catastrophic nation-ending errors is fundamentally broken. This is precisely why President Putin's direct telephone call matters so profoundly. It bypasses this impenetrable filter of sycophants and serves as one of the extremely rare conduits through which brutally accurate information can actually reach the isolated president. Let me state with absolute, unflinching directness exactly what the sole remaining exit from this catastrophic situation entails. The narrow window of time in which this specific off-ramp remains available is violently slamming shut with every passing escalatory action. This crucial exit fundamentally begins with profound private institutional honesty that actively produces drastically changed decisions. It requires an assessment acknowledging that 3 specific objectives were publicly stated and 0 were achieved. 40 days of multi-billion-dollar strategic bombing accomplished absolutely nothing of strategic value. Iran's governing regime remains structurally intact and politically stronger. Their formidable missiles remain fully operational, and their nuclear program is entirely off the diplomatic table. The blockade stops a pitiful 3% of maritime traffic, while catastrophic economic damage accelerates towards structural devastation. The basic framework of a comprehensive diplomatic settlement offered by Moscow is highly visible. Concrete security guarantees for the Iranian nation, the formal inclusion of Russian and Chinese co-signatures, a revised nuclear framework that does not force Iran to surrender its sovereign position on enrichment, and a newly structured arrangement for the Strait of Hormuz that formally grants Iran internationally monitored commercial coordination authority. This settlement demands the United States accept a newly evolved regional order with a significantly reduced American military footprint, acknowledged Iranian sovereign interests, and legitimized Russian and Chinese involvement in Middle East security. This is undeniably not the unipolar world American foreign policy preferred, but it is the uncompromising world the brutal operational reality of this conflict has definitively produced. The only actual choice remaining is between accepting this multipolar reality through immediate diplomatic negotiation at a high but manageable cost, or stubbornly continuing down a disastrous path leading to the total destruction of vital Gulf state economic infrastructure, absolute global economic collapse, and a severely degraded American strategic posture. If a profound strategic reckoning does not occur within the next 72 hours, the rapidly closing window for the least catastrophic exit closes entirely. Devastating strikes upon the UAE will drastically escalate. Gulf state governments will make desperate survival calculations, moving them further from Washington, and terrifying economic indicators will cross irreversible thresholds. Time is the ultimate critical variable, and it is running in only one devastating direction. The ceasefire is officially over. Iranian missiles are dominating the air, and panicked Gulf states are declaring national emergencies. Yet the deeply delusional administration continues to describe this unfolding apocalypse as a triumphant demonstration of American strength. The disastrous policy driving this global conflict is being aggressively authored by an Israeli-aligned think tank and blindly implemented by officials who have completely replaced accurate assessment with hopelessly manufactured confidence. President Putin delivered an uncompromising warning directly from Iranian leadership and offered a highly viable pathway to settlement. Whether any of this vital intelligence actually penetrated the toxic echo chamber surrounding the decision maker is the single most terrifyingly open question of the next 72 hours. The diplomatic exit is currently available, but the institutional environment required to execute it is the exact same toxic environment, producing nothing but manufactured delusion. I am Colonel Douglas McGregor, presenting for the Global Insight Network. If this rigorous military analysis revealed crucial operational truths the official narrative cannot afford to acknowledge, share it, subscribe for assessments that meet reality rather than manage it, and carefully observe whether Washington can find the diplomatic off-ramp before crossing the point of absolute no return.